Members, we have a quorum, and this is the appointed time. Now, I'd like to invite the Secretariat to invite the administration and representatives of the consultants firm to come in. And today we have to deal with two issues. The first one is to hear from the administration and the consultants on measures to improve the operating environment of public markets, and they're going to give us a report. The second matter is to decide whether to extend the period of work of the subcommittee. The Secretariat reminded me that the subcommittee held its first meeting last year on the 25th of March, which means that our term will expire on the 24th of March this year. But of course, we understand that this is just the first time we hear from the administration their report on measures to improve the operating environment of public markets, and we might need some follow-up on some issue. On reviewing the rental adjustment mechanism, we have yet to discuss it. So when we come to the second item, we can discuss and decide whether to apply with the House Committee to extend the work of this subcommittee by 3 months. Or if not, we might have to queue up again for work to be resumed next year. So let me first welcome Secretary for Food and Health and his team, and also representatives of the consultancy. Let me welcome our new Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Cherry Chair. So, Secretary, would you like to briefly walk us through the report and then defer to your colleague to give a PowerPoint presentation? Chairman, members, may I suggest this? Because earlier we commissioned the BMT Asia Pacific Limited as our consultant to study measures to improve the operating environment of public markets. Now, in terms of the functions and positioning of public markets and on how to improve operating environment and management of public markets, they have given us some recommendations. So may I first invite the consultant to give a presentation, and then we will set out our views on the recommendations. Who would like to give this presentation? Thank you. Dr. Su. Thank you, Chairman, members. Thank you, Secretary. Happy New Year. How much time do we have to give this presentation? No pressure. Take your time. We have a dozen slides. We'll try to speed things up as soon as possible. Now, we're here today to share with members outcome of our study. So first of all, an overview of this study and the criteria in selecting the 6 markets, and details of the improvement measures for these 6 public markets and other considerations. Now, let me first walk members through the purpose of this study and the scope. The purpose of this study is to make recommendations on the functions and positioning of public markets, and to make recommendations on improving the operating environment. And there are 4 stages. The first stage is to review the functions and positioning of public markets and to give our views. And the second stage involves delegating a team to conduct site visits at various public markets. And we also conducted questionnaire surveys. And then we chose 5 to 6 public markets as the scope of our study. The third stage is the focus of our study. And that is in relation to the markets selected. We propose details on the measures to improve These markets, and the fourth stage involves general improvement measures and other conservation proposals or preservation of stalls selling traditional commodities. Now, one of the main components of our study is to collect views from different stakeholders, and they include the industry, patrons, and government. In the study, we had conducted consultations, sessions, focus groups, and one questionnaire survey to collect views from stakeholders. Now, on functions and positioning, our view is that public markets will continue to be one of the major sources of fresh food provisions for the general public. And this is undeniably an important function for the public. This may not, for the second function, it may not be the most or the reason for setting up public markets, but public markets provide job opportunities to the public. And there are views that public markets are public resources. So it is very important to ensure an effective utilization of public resources, and therefore the government has a responsibility to ensure that public resources are effectively utilized. And these are our comments on the functions and positioning of public markets. Now, we have three goals in terms of the improvement measures. The first goal is to improve market facilities, after which we hope to attract more patrons. The third goal is that for the markets with improvement plans implemented, they can serve to be examples and demonstrations for other markets. Methodology. Now, we narrow our scope in relation to the public market selected based on site visits and existing data, and 15 markets are within our scope, and through questionnaire survey we chose 5 to 6 markets. Dr. Su, sorry, I'm sorry that I have to interject, but judging from the speed that you're going, I don't think we have enough time for members to discuss your plans. So can you focus on the latter part of your presentation, starting from page 51. Of course, I understand that you need to tell us the criteria for selecting those markets. And with due respect, it may be easier for us to understand just by reading your presentation. But starting from page 51 of your presentation, I think members may wish to comment on it. This is about non-physical improvement and priorities. And then you come to talk about management model and the new management direction and preservation of stalls for selling traditional commodities and other considerations. I think this will be the focus of today's meeting. I just want to remind you, and I hope you could go through the first 50 pages as soon as possible so that we can come to page 51. So we'll try to go through the former part as soon as possible. So that means we have the certain selection criteria, as you can see. And at the preliminary stage, we chose 15 public markets, and then we conducted a questionnaire survey in great detail. And I'll be happy to take questions in this regard. Now, eventually, we chose 6 markets: Chunwan, Gaoqiwan, Wingfong Street, Yaomate, Lockhart Road, and Shangfeng Street public markets. And should we go through the improvement plans for each and every market? Yes, please do briefly so that members understand your selection and may comment on it if the markets chosen is not representative enough. Well, there are selection criteria, and we awarded scores to different markets based on our site visits. Some public markets might not have good facilities, but they're situated in busy locations, so on and so forth. And we take the middle of the road approach. And chose the 6 markets which we think would be more representative, and they're divided into different locations of different scale. That's the matrix for our calculation. And in the end, we chose 6 public markets which we believe to be more representative. They are of different sizes. Some may be in urban districts, some may be in rural districts. And in fact, we visited these markets, 90% of them, except perhaps Shuttlecock market, which is quite remote. And in terms of design, our architect will in a minute brief you on improvement measures.
In simple terms, a crucial factor of markets is that whether it is easily accessible. Some markets are better than others in this respect. So you cannot too easily tackle this fundamental factor. Sometimes markets don't look like markets. This will be easier to change. Like the red apple market, you will still remember it is a market. This is helpful. What do we go to markets for? To buy fresh provisions. And product supply is another thing to look into. Very often market stallholders say that it is quite hot in the markets. We can look into air conditioning or other ventilation methods. Markets have been used to house on-street hawkers, and in old type markets, the store size is small because it is formulated on the basis of hawker stalls. And insufficient space has given rise to different problems. The floor may be wet, and this can, of course, be attributive to the habits of some store owners. The tiles can be slippery. But we now see vacant stalls because some live poultry stalls have moved away. There is also competition on the streets around the market. All these exert pressure on the operation of markets. Our architect has looked at the 6 chosen markets, and now some concrete reconstruction proposals have been put forward. Can I defer to our architect, Mr. Young? Good morning. I will talk about the physical improvements. I will give my presentation in 2 parts. First of all, common or generic proposals that can apply to all markets. Secondly, targeted improvement measures for selected markets. First of all, the generic changes, the design of stalls. In FEHD old-type markets, the stalls are built like a cubicle without a frontage. It's all right if there is just one stall, but if it is in a row, if the configuration is not good, but in particular, it's like you are walking in a maze, and the shopping experience will not be positive. Markets do not have business because patrons will just buy from the first two stalls. Also, when there are tall walls, stallholders tend to stack their products and supplies up to the ceiling, and this can be obstructive, and also if sprinklers are blocked by the stacking of products, it will be quite dangerous in a fire. And therefore, we don't think the design is desirable. In new tight markets, the tall walls have been abandoned, but low walls have been preferred, and it's so much nicer to look at, and you can see through the entire row, even at the entrance. And then more concretely, we can look at poultry, fish, and vegetable stalls, and we can vary the stall design because of the type of commodities sold. Now, you may ask whether that will detract from storage space. Well, it depends. If you are selling vegetables or meat, they do not have to store anything for the day. We can use vacant stalls for storage. Those can be used as storage space, and stallholders can put the goods there. But if people sell dehydrated seafood, we can still provide one tall wall for them to stack up their supplies. Now, the overall configuration. In the past, we have long corridors, and the stalls are placed in a long row. It is convenient. It is also space-saving, but it's not good for business. People would see this long corridor, and they don't want to go to the end. They just buy from the first two stalls. So those at the end have no business. It's worse if the stalls in the front do not open for business. Customers will just turn away. And we like to propose this new design in the shape of fields. The experience will be different if you are a patron. You can stand at any vantage point, and you will get a grasp of the overall configuration, and you can see that we can have bigger stalls and also bigger display space. Let us look at air conditioning. Many stallholders would like to have air conditioning for better temperature control. However, we need to mildly adjust the vents. It would be best if the vents are in the corridor, and then the air can be extracted above the stalls, and it will also be good for odor control. And then next, the floor. Very often people say it is quite wet. We actually see drainage holes in the aisles or corridors. The floor is wet simply because the stallholders will be washing the stalls, and they would just pour the water that they want to discard onto those drainage holes in the middle of the aisle. No matter how many times you mop the floor clean, it will still always be wet. Now, since the drains are in the common area, it is human nature that people don't pay a lot of attention to it, and then the water that they wash the floor with will be filled with debris and sundry items, and the holes can be blocked. So we'd like to propose that these drainage holes should be inside the stalls, and the stall owners will have the incentive to keep them free from blockade. And, customers will not wet the floor. But if the drainage holes are within the stalls, there is every incentive for stallholders to keep them unblocked and to keep their own stalls clean and dry. Next, we'd like to have more CCTV cameras so we can have multifunction security. And also, we can turn vacant stalls into storage space. Now, toilets. If the toilets are improved, we can have a much better experience. And also the signs or signage. We can uniform the store signage, and again, it will be much better. And also the directional signs. I think they are not designed well. They don't really tell you a lot. Some storeholders themselves would draw on the tiles in order to direct customers to them. We need to improve the design of these directional signs. We have taken a closer look at the 6 markets, and these are the main points for improvement. Now, of course, this can have a prototype or demonstrative effect, and in fact they can be applied on markets with similar characteristics. First one, Yau Ma Tei. There is an atrium in the middle, which is hugely underused. Only bicycles are parked there. If we can open it up, it can help with patron circulation, and the entire market would have better orientation. Next, retrofitting lifts and a ventilation system, etc. Okay, let me talk about this atrium. We can have an escalator in the middle, and the middle will be part of the access. This is what we can do on the second floor. This is the ground floor. This is the first floor. We can have new design of the stalls. And also at a new Reclamation Street, there are many street stalls, and it's quite a busy area. If the outer wall can be opened up, it will attract more people into the market, Chinwan Market. Apart from the basic design, there is this problem. Seafood, meat, and wet stalls are placed on the first floor. This is quite uncommon. Usually, wet goods stalls are placed on the ground floor near the unloading area, because when fish is moved around, the entire area will become wet. But in Chinwan, because of historical reasons perhaps, these are placed on the first floor. So our proposal is to redesign or reconfigure the stalls. We can provide extra storage at the same time. This is the proposed layout plan. This market is also quite enclosed. We like to improve the outer walls. Some stalls should face outward so we can have better connection with the street. Lockhart Road Market. Its configuration and hardware is quite okay, but its problem has to do with the low turnover, especially for wet goods stalls. However, dry goods stalls have very good business. Again, this is quite uncommon. We observe the situation deeper, and in fact, there are 2 more markets around it. Wan Chai Market and also Baoling Street Market. And we have to look closer at the patron profile of these 3 markets. Very often, housewives or domestic helpers, they would prefer the other 2 markets, but not Lockhart Road Market. Around Lockhart Road, we have many offices, but not residential units. The entire Lockhart Road is full of decoration shops, and also electrical works shops, and also clothes mending or conversion shops. Now, if that's the case, we don't have to stick to the original design to have everything in the market. We can adjust it according to the patron profile around, and we can do something about the trade mix. If around Lockhart Road we have so many offices, perhaps we can allow the stall owners some flexibility. Can they sell more snacks or instant food? Maybe office workers may like to get a lunchbox from the market. And as to the hardware, again, we can have glass panels replacing the solid walls on the outside. Next, Aoqiwan. It has a serious problem because the business is not good. The configuration is very chaotic. It's really like a maze. So business is not good. What is strange is that it is quite heavily patronized. Outside on Kimchi Lane, there is a market which is also very busy. And people actually are patronizing this open market instead of Aochiwan Market. Kimchi Lane is here. Originally, at the end of Kimchi Lane, you can see Aochiwan Market, but only the wall. First of all, we'd like to open up this wall, and this is how it looks. People in Kimchi Lane can be led into the market.
And also we should rationalize the internal layout so that it can stay open and people can have a nice environment as they do their shopping inside. Now, the next one is Shangfeng Street Market. It is a small market. The layout inside is tidy. We just need to rationalize a few things to improve the outlook of the market. For example, to fix the entrances and also to improve ventilation. And at the entrance, according to local residents, not many are aware of the existence of this market. So perhaps we can redecorate the entrance to make this market more visible. The last market is Wingfong Street. It is a small market, just a one-story market. But the problem is this. Outside the market in Wingfong Street, it is very crowded. But here we have a large loading and unloading area. This cannot bring patrons in. So we should switch the refuse room with the loading and unloading bay with the entrance so as to attract more customers. So that's basically about the design. So after going through the proposed designs, which seeks to rationalize the problems, we then come to non-physical improvements. We have a lot of ideas, but I think the core is to strengthen routine management and also to fix some issues. For example, there are vacant stalls or inactive stalls, and we need to think about how we can keep the market vibrant and also keep the markets clean and tidy. I think these are the basic functions of the market, and people will welcome them if we can fix these problems. There are also other quick win solutions. For example, we can consider whether to enable octopus payment. In our focus group discussions, some young customers comment that this will keep the markets tidy, and we can also consider providing ATM services to add value to markets. On publicity, well, in public markets overseas, they have their own websites to tell customers what types of goods they sell, and this will instill a greater sense of belonging in the local community. And there could also be skills upgrade program for tenants. And we already have some courses in the market. But all in all, the most important point is to improve routine management of market. Well, this is not an easy task. So let's say something about management. Let's see how our markets are being managed at the moment. We have a bureau, a department, and then a working division overseeing markets. Now, there are two types of routine management. One is management by staff of FEHD. The other is contractors who are responsible for cleaning, basic inspection, etc. And the government does provide a detailed checklist for contractors to follow. So I think the problem we identified is with the problem of sense of ownership. If this is a privately run market, those well-performing tenants may be able to make more benefit, and this is an incentive. So it's all about a sense of ownership. In Chinese, the term entails both responsibilities and powers. So I was also in the business sector once. I understand the importance of this formula. You need to take up responsibility if you are given power, so that if you commit more, you can make more profit. And this will give you good business. But as far as public markets are concerned, the sense of ownership in stakeholders is quite weak. Government contractors may follow the government's checklist, and that's it. But it's difficult to push them to take a step further. The government, likewise, only follows all the rules and regulations, and it's hard to push them to take another step. But we need to resolve problems and stay innovative or creative. So it's about increasing the sense of ownership and allowing tenants more opportunities to manage the markets. And we have some ideas. We're not giving you a few options only. These are just directions that we might consider. The first suggestion is that we have a market management committee for each public market, and our suggestion is to allow tenants or increase the ability of committees to make decisions. Now, for example, if the advisory committee has the power to make decisions to, say, change a mediocre contractor, then things may improve. And we can set the terms of reference for the decision-making power of the advisory committee. Now, it is an advisory body. It is set up to advise the government. But in future, if it is allowed to make certain decisions, the representativeness of the committee can also be reconsidered. For example, like owners' corporation, whether the membership can be returned by votes. The second proposal is to consider whether a community management corporation can be set up, represented by tenants, district councillors, and government representative. And this is also the views expressed by the local communities. Well, in the past, when we had the district council or the urban council, many decisions were made by the urban council, and it helped if we have something similar to make decisions. And as mentioned just now about powers and responsibilities, this can help strike a balance. And financially speaking, we can also consider whether the committee can give us more input. The third suggestion is to adopt a single operator only. Now, you may wonder, if we only sublet the market to a single operator, then prices may go up. But I think we can perhaps think out of the box. For example, the single operator may be in the form of a co-op of tenants. So these are some ideas that we floated, and of course we can discuss these ideas if you have suggestions, and we can also compare the different models. For example, at present, in terms of the government's participation in routine management, it is high. We can say that it's heavily relied on the government, but with different models in future, the government's participation level may be lowered, and on the contrary, for tenants' participation under different management models, their participation may be strengthened. Now, for a single operator model, if it's sublet to only a single company, then the level of participation by tenants may be low, but not in the case if the single operator is in the form of a cooperative society made up of tenants. So if the third party has a stronger sense of duties and responsibilities, then the markets can be less dependent on the government financially. But of course, the government remains the major gatekeeper. And as mentioned just now, we talk about the pros and cons of different management models. And we may also need to consider whether it's feasible, legally speaking, to have a single operator, because the existing law requires that public markets should be sublet to an individual instead of a company. And on preservation of stores selling traditional commodities, well, I can speak at length on this issue, but let's cut it short. At present, public markets is a vessel that preserves a lot of traditional commodities and traditional culture. For example, during Chinese New Year, you can get traditional New Year food, and this gives us a lot of knowledge on traditional culture. These public markets have high cultural values, and they are indispensable. And in this economic environment, public markets allow small-scale operators to operate their business, and it's really indispensable. So we should enhance publicity, we should acknowledge these markets, we should preserve them. In other countries, many consider their public markets a tourist attraction, and this is also one of the directions we can explore. On the other hand, as mentioned just now, some public markets are operating quite satisfactorily. They may have a good environment, they may have good facilities, but some other markets may have a lot of vacant stores because of older facilities. And as we have fewer and fewer poultry stores, we may get more space for individual tenants to bid and operate a store there. As for traditional trades, well, there is a list of permitted trades, and there is in fact a tradesman or craftsmanship, mending socks, shoesmith, etc. Well, they may be quite outdated. If we can widen the tradesmen's list, say by having something like tradesman bracket others, then interested individuals can apply. Also, some markets are more spacious, so horizontally we can broaden the scope of trades. Vertically speaking, at present some preserved goods or pastries are not really allowed in the markets. I mean the production of these goods, and we can consider allowing the whole process to be carried out in markets. Finally, we visited different markets, different tenants. They have different requests. We understand that some requests are quite unreasonable. On the other hand, some requests are not really agreeable to us, and in the process, our suggestion is for a task force to be set up by the government to consider the different modes of operation of different markets.
Say, for example, why people don't operate the stores. When tenants face change, they naturally have a lot of concerns and worries. Can we not talk to them? In the process of this consultancy, we have found that some people in the community and some stallholders need to have an explanation on the advantages of different proposals and whether there will be interim measures. They were quite positive and forthcoming, so if we could provide some transitional arrangements, there is a chance for us to start this project more easily, but we need to conduct reviews on the way. We think these are important execution aspects. That is the presentation. Mr. Ko, on behalf of the Bureau, would you like to tell us your view on the consultancy? Yes, Chairman. The consultancy report is by and large completed, so we have the presentation today, and you should have a summary of the consultancy report in the paper. However, the report itself has to be further worked on. When the report is completed, we will waste no time in publishing it. We will do that on the government website. From the summary and the presentation today, I can say that you would have already got a grip of the main observations and proposals of the consultant. As for the government, with regard to the observations of the functions and positioning of public markets, we by and large agree to it, especially the function of the markets being a main source of supply of fresh provisions. We also agree that we should keep markets clean and neat and tidy and decent. But then, since public markets serve the general public, we should not aim to make these markets unduly upmarket. When we decide to refurbish or renovate these public markets, we should position markets, as I have said. Looking ahead, while we should allow public markets to expound their functions and also to make them attractive to the public, we should also take more proactive action to enforce the law in order to tackle the inactive stalls. This is pointed out by the consultant, and that is the stallholders should have a bigger responsibility in keeping the public accesses clean and open. We should allow the stallholders have this sense of responsibility. Many markets are very accessible and they're in convenient locations. They should be more attractive to the public. They should be allowed to expound their potential so the utilization rate is boosted. This is the way we should make use of our very valuable land resources. Indeed, public markets also provide job opportunities. However, we do not conduct any means test or assessment when we let out the market stalls. Therefore, it's not appropriate to treat markets as social welfare for the tenants, and we agree. In fact, a lot of the rental has stayed at a low level for protracted periods of time. When we make our own proposals later, we have to take that up with this subcommittee. As the chairman said, we should look at the fee setting and adjustment mechanism. We agree with these viewpoints, but we also hasten to add that stallholders are from different backgrounds. Some of them were ex-hawkers or clearees from other public markets. And the low rental for them may have to be taken into account when we think about a future fee adjustment mechanism. But overall speaking, as I said, they have not been subject to any eligibility or means test, but they have been renting the stalls as a commercial operation. As I said, some of them were clearees from other markets or they were ex-hawkers. We agree we should have special consideration for them. Depending on the characteristics of markets, including the location, competitors, and also other factors, each market should be able to expound its potential, and it should, of course, always provide the public with fresh food provisions, or they can also be able to provide more upmarket food, for example, organic vegetables or fruits. I think we can allow that to happen. As for the physical improvements, when the consultant looks further at the 6 markets selected, we think we should have the right to decide whether indeed we should start with improving these 6 selected markets. We need to study into the issue further. We should consult technical departments before we make a decision as to whether we would go for the 6 selected market first. I think members may have different views also. We'd like to listen to members first. And also, we must also consider the technical side of things. And only after that will we decide whether the 6 markets would indeed be the first batch for improvement works. The consultant also talked about management of public markets. We will look further and deeper into the consultant's proposals. We agree that we should explore into different ways and means of management, but we have to have regard for resources and priority. We understand if we need to reform the management model, we also have to increase manpower so that we can roll out the improvement plans smoothly. We should step up with enforcement, training, and management techniques. We must also inculcate the management concepts into the team who are responsible for management of the markets. We will then look at these views again, and then after we have collected members' views, we will come back with a concrete improvement plan to the subcommittee in due course. But at the same time, we should start to revisit the fee adjustment mechanism. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. I'm aware that what you said just now goes beyond the paper you submitted to this subcommittee, and that is CB-2-643-01. I don't know whether you'd like to share your script with us. Secondly, is my understanding correct in that today members' views expressed at the meeting may have a bearing on your final decisions? Is that right? Can you clarify? The answer to both questions is affirmative. Thank you very much, Secretary. Now the floor is open for members' questions. Since we have a small number of members here today, and since we have quite sufficient time, I will allow each 7 minutes. Please state your views or ask questions within 7 minutes. Now, members, please indicate your desire to speak. This will be the order of speaking. Leung Yiu-chung, Sit Ho, Wong Kwok Hing, and Michael Tian. Leung Yiu-chung, 7 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I'm not a member of the subcommittee, but I'm here because you have selected 6 markets. I have been watching one of these markets starting from 1985, in other words, a whole stretch of 30 years. And if I remember correctly, your consultancy interviewed me, and some of my views have been taken on board. I'd like to thank you for that. I'd like to take the opportunity to state my views also. But before I do that, on behalf of Mr. Raymond Chen Chi-Chin, I'd like to ask you this question. Why is it that you have not chosen any markets from NT East? He finds that strange, and he would like you to explain that in a moment. Today, we talk about markets, and the report is divided into 2 parts, the hardware and the software. First of all, the hardware. It's quite strange. As the consultants said, there should be more communication. So I hope the Bureau Secretary will listen to me. Please do not take forward the proposed hardware improvement. They are a consultancy, but they do not operate within markets. They have no experience of that. They say they want to redesign the configuration of stalls. I have a big question mark about that. I am sure you need to communicate with the stall owners. You need to ask the users what they think. I don't want you to make the situation even worse. Secondly, hardware. The paper says that ventilation is most important, just like the market on Wing Fong Street. The ventilation system has been much improved. Secretary, if you have time, go there and take a look. They have used ceiling fans, wall fans. They have got different vents to improve circulation of air, but then it is not successful. They have tried different ventilation systems, but there is little success. The stallholders would just like to have air conditioning. The government said, yes, I am willing to do it, but you need 80% support. And the stallholders could not arrive at that threshold. It is because air conditioning is too expensive. The stall owners say they cannot make a profit big enough to support the AC fees, but the government has been unwilling to budge. The stall owner said, if you ask me only to pay the AC fees for my own stall, I would be quite happy to do it. And they are saying they should not support the AC fees for the corridors, but the administration is unwilling. Can you now tell us whether you can think about the air conditioning expenses more? They are quite mechanical in that the air conditioning has to be kept on from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. regardless of the patronage. People stop their business at 6 or 7, but then they have to keep it up until 8 p.m. and it has to be set at a certain temperature, and sometimes it's too cold. This is too rigid. As the consultant said, you should meet the needs and aspirations of the store owners. At the same time, please do not accept one proposal in the report. Mr. Secretary said that there is this point of low rental. You have to think about this. They have no business. And if you ask them to pay higher rent, does it mean you want to drive them out of business altogether? This is impractical. Please do not listen to the consultant. Not this proposal anyway. You can ask the store owners. They operate with a very simple concept. If I have business, it's all right for you to raise the rent, but then there is no business. The markets are quite deserted, and you should not raise the rental now. Now I'd like to address the software side. I would agree with the report. Some of my views have been taken on board. What I'd like to say is, Starting from 1985, I have been watching this Wing Fong Street market. I'd like to remind you that you should leave some time for a reply. You have used 4.5 minutes already. Over the last 30 years, I have seen good times and bad times for this Wing Fong Street market. When it was managed by the regional council, it was in a better shape because regional councillors listened to the views of the store owners, and then they made decisions at the RC for execution by the FEHD. But now the FEHD doesn't listen to people. This is important. In other words, you should allow participation by store owners, allow them to be part of the decision process. Then you can meet their needs. At the time of the regional council, this was what happened. So I hope you can do something with this software.
So I'd like the administration or the consultant to respond. Secretary or Dr. Su, I'll ask a consultant to respond to the point about selection of public markets. So why none in NT East? Switch on the mic, please. Yes, please continue. Because of all the markets, we'd like to select 5 or 6 representative markets. If we have one in NT East, we may not have one in NT West. So our consideration was that it should not be based on location only. Some markets might be too small and therefore not suitable. Based on patronage, location, facilities, and scale, we screen out some. For the remaining markets, we sent out questionnaires to tenants, and based on the information gathered, we chose 15 markets and divided them into different scales: large, medium, small, or those in urban or rural areas. And we did not distinguish between NT East or NT West. Because of the limited number of markets to be chosen, we only divided them according to what I said just now, and then we chose one which is more representative among others in the same group. That is the market that may need more improvement. Next, Ms. Sid Ho and Mr. Wong Kok Heng. Ms. Sid Ho. Thank you, Chairman. I agree strongly that more services should be provided in public markets. We do have them. Mending shoes, altering clothes. Well, Ms. Chang, Patsy just now said that on the list we even have a trade for mending socks, but I don't think we have any nowadays. Nobody would mend socks. However, we can repair machines, repair computers. I urge the administration to consider this. In public markets, we should allow the provision of services. When we redevelop an area, we saw examples of clocksmith occupying such a small stall being driven away, but it is entirely possible for them to be rehoused on the upper floor of a public market. So I urge the administration to reorganize the trades list to reflect modern needs, so that even young people can bring their computers to public markets for repair. In North Point Market, Typo Market, and Happy Valley cooked food stalls, we have famous restaurants and famous stalls with high patronage. In other countries, the cooked food stall and the dining area is actually combined, so maybe things can be a bit less rigid. You don't need to house the cooking stalls on the upper floor and market on the lower floor. But of course, we need to keep the place tidy and make it more tidy and clean. I have two questions, Chairman. Just now, Patsy talked about Lockhart Road Market, and it is losing out to other open stall markets. Well, in fact, for open stall market, it is also very wet, but it has good ventilation. If you talk about crowdedness, then of course, if the stores are outdoor, then it is less crowded. And I want to rebut one of the points mentioned by the consultant. Shoppers don't just go to the first two stalls. For housewives doing grocery shopping, they actually go all the way along the aisle. But the point is, the stores are so crowded they cannot reach the end of the aisle. So in the outdoor area with a better environment, shoppers can walk along the aisle. So, Patsy, for have you made any comparisons between different types of markets, supermarkets, public markets, and open space stalls? Is it that indoor public markets are not as good as outdoor markets? Can we house outdoor stores in public markets? And we need to revamp the layout of public markets. Now, this is a question for the administration. How are you going to take back some stalls and enlarge the stalls? But this will obviously result in a reduction in number of tenants. And when the market is retendered, will you also consider the business plan and the viability of the bidder? So that, in fact, when you tender out the stalls in the market, you need to have a holistic plan to find the right mix for the market. Secretary, what will be your arrangement? What is your answer? Now, on the proposal to revise the layout of public markets, the consultant's recommendations contain different options. Now, just now, some examples are given, and we may need a total revamp of the interior of public markets. On the other hand, there are other options. For example, if we have resistance from existing tenants, we can only make minor revisions to the layout. So, on the whole, we're talking about discussion with existing tenants as far as software is concerned, and to reach a consensus. For some public markets, due to various reasons, there may already be some vacant stalls. Now, as far as vacant stalls are concerned, some are really vacant, some are not in operation, although they may have been taken up by tenants already. And if we're talking about increasing the area per stall, then this can be done if there are vacant stalls in that market. In some other markets where there are fewer vacant stalls, it's really difficult to enlarge the space. It's really difficult to drive away tenants in the market if the market is performing well. So the most important thing is to discuss with stakeholders. That is why in selecting public markets, the consultant based its selection on unique characteristics of public markets instead of locations. I do have some reservations whether ultimately we really need to choose these 6 markets. Well, Chairman, this is about the government's capability in planning for public markets and the use of the space. I'll wait for a second round. Well, I'll do my best. I'm not sure whether we have a second round. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, followed by Mr. Michael Tien. Thank you, Chairman. About the outcome of the consultancy study, I am grateful for the consultants' effort. The outcome is innovative. Well, I was a member of the former Urban Council and also the Advisory Committee. I have long been paying attention to issues surrounding public markets, and on your study, in which 6 markets have been chosen, suggestions have been given, and I acknowledge your effort. Now, in your study, I'm concerned about, for example, lighting in public markets, ceiling, I think these 2 problems have not been given attention in your study, same as fire service installations. As for your proposed improvement plans, again, I commend you for your effort, but I won't spend time going through them again. I have a question for the consultant. Now, the FEHD has this requirement. Only when 85% of tenants agree to the air conditioning installation in a public market would this be taken on. Now, have you looked into this? I'd like the consultant to answer that. In general, tenants have great reservations over the FEHD's requirement. They find this unreasonable. They find the threshold too high. So what is your view? Secondly, you have improvement proposals on hardware and software, and vertically and horizontally you have put forward suggestions for improvement. Now my question is this: what measures do you suggest the government implement in order to achieve that? Because we have different markets, they're complex in nature, it's really difficult to do this operation, so to speak. If I were the government, I would ask you for suggestions to find the best solution. Of course, it's up to government to decide whether to improve markets or not. So what proposals do you have for this surgery? Now, as I understand, these 2 questions from Mr. Wong are for the consultant, Dr. Su, on lighting, FSI, and ceiling. Maybe I'll defer to the architect, Mr. Yeung, to take it. Well, perhaps you don't need to answer this part anyway. Your report contains little about these matters anyway. These are just details. My question is about the 85% threshold. Have you looked into this matter, and what is your view? So 2 questions. 85% for air conditioning to be installed. The other question is what strategy you have in relation to the 70-odd public markets. Now, about the 85% issue, we heard different views from different tenants. Of course, there is a high proportion of tenants who want air conditioning to be installed. This is a general policy, and this has caused air conditioning installation more difficult. So that depends on whether it is really important for air conditioning to be installed in the public market. If AC is considered a modern facility, then yes, it is a basic facility. If, however, there is good ventilation in the public market, it may not be necessary. But that we have historical problems with the structure of public markets and layout. For example, stalls are all crammed together, and it may be difficult to install AC, and there are also other problems. So if you say 85% majority, I think this is a high threshold. But even if we lower the threshold, does it mean we can resolve other problems? I think we need determination and great effort to improve public markets.
What strategy should the government take? We have put forward some options that can be used for reference. And we are not talking about a broad brush approach at all. We should allow the community to discuss it, and in the end, store owners will tell you which one they prefer and which one they find most palatable. That would turn out to be a more ideal solution. But of course, communication may not be easy. Members, you have experience working in the districts, and you may know some markets really well. I think in the process we should have concerted efforts made before we can find a solution. But then I'm sure we can go in that direction. Mr. Wong, a very brief one. That is why I hope the chairman can do this. We should have a public consultation when the consultancy report is ready. Let us have more people participate in the process. We don't want to jump to a conclusion. Ms. Zhang said this just now. She said the 85% threshold is the policy of the government all along. But let me tell you that this is what happened only after reunification, after the abolition of the regional and urban councils. When I was an urban councillor, we did not have that 85% threshold, so that's for record. In your report, the consultant, can you include this topic? And that is, can you comment on this 85% threshold in your report? Can we include this part? I think we are bogged down by this issue when we want to improve the public markets. Secretary, in the final report of the consultant, will there be a discussion on the 85% threshold for installing air conditioning? I think it is up to the consultant to decide. I cannot direct the consultant how to write his report, but if I may, I'd like to say something. Well, no, please don't. Mr. Wang's time is up. I'm just asking you whether you would propose including this part in the report. Just now I said the consultancy report is more or less complete. We are just touching it up. If there is not this item in the report, then it won't be there. Okay, other members can speak on this. Can I just have a very brief one? Please, very brief indeed. If the consultant is willing, even if there is not this topic in the report, please include a comment, as Ms. Zhang already said so. Well, I'm aware that when the Secretary answered my question, he said that our views expressed today could have a bearing on the final report. Mr. Michael Tian and then Mr. Chen Han-pan, 7 minutes. I would like to have the flexibility in controlling time. I might need half an hour before I can ask all the questions. Well, I understand. Chairman, I don't think this review will be very successful. I don't know, after this one, we'll have to wait another 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years for another review. I think the biggest problem now is the structure, the overall structure. Whatever we are talking about, we're just tackling the symptoms, not the roots of problems. You may make many proposals, which in my eyes are good, but I would say that you have ducked the core issues, and that is whether the government should still play this role. Who should manage our markets? I can give you a few examples. You cannot raise the rental because some of these people are clearies. So do you want to continue with the low rental? But they are not competitive at all. They are not attracting patrons to the markets. Can you buy them off? Can you give them an amount of money and then you retender the markets to other people? Can you do that? You seem to be in a straitjacket. Can we have a harsher tenancy provisions? You know, people use the stalls as storage space now. They do not operate the stalls for 7-8 days. You cannot take them to court because they would say that you bully them. I have been to a market. People would be putting the goods on the aisles, and I cannot even pull a cart through the aisle. You ask the FEHD to enforce the law, again you would be scolded. And if you want to retrofit air conditioning, you need an 85% support. Can you do it? Well, even if you can do it, there is another condition. Very often people object to having AC, not because of the 85% threshold, but people want to continue with their business while AC is retrofitted. That is not possible. If the market is successful, you can choose your tenants, but now you can't. You can only give it to the highest bidders, and then you talk about fair competition, this and that. Can you select somebody who doesn't pay the highest rent, but who is selling commodities that are attractive and welcomed by the public? Because this is a public market, but then you have your hands tied. The government should remain a government. You should not manage some enterprises with a commercial element. I am an entrepreneur who has survived on rentals. I am now a people's representative. I need to make money, but then I have to be aware of people's livelihood and interests and welfare. And then if you spend public money like this, I don't have an easy time. But then the people would say, if the government sits on a big reserve, why keep the money? And then you invented the statutory bodies. Just remember the KCRC. If it was managed by the administration, it could stay like that without raising fares for 100 years. But then it became a statutory body. It did not have such a easy time as the MTRCL when fares were raised. But then it would still be possible. We said that we should be self-sufficient. We did not want to provide welfare, and then we were able to do what we wanted to do. The MTRCL was able to hide behind a small board of directors. So isn't this time for you to spin off the entire market operation? I mean, you hive it off. You set up a statutory body and to be set up by famous people in the community, and then you write out the terms of reference is in a very strict manner. First of all, you can ask markets to be self-sufficient. And secondly, the rental charged should not be higher than the market rent, or else it would be a replica of Ling REIT. Number 3, since it is self-sufficient, the returns would be capped. In other words, if they operate successfully, if they make a big profit, people would ask you to lower the rent. But I want you to cap the return on asset. How do you do it? If it is found that business is good, then it can charge market rent and people still flock to it, and 100% of the stalls are rented out, then the return may be very high. And then you can force it to reinvest in the market, make it even more attractive and retrofit air conditioning, etc. The market in my dreams is really renovated and beautiful. People pay market rent, and the people flow would not be less than that of private markets. If you can do that, these will not be markets that are replicating the link REIT markets which sell expensive goods. If the terms of reference is that you allow the statutory body to think about prices, then we can choose tenants of the right level. I don't think our public market should go up market. Leave that to link REIT. Our public markets are public markets which should serve the grassroots, which should sell reasonably priced goods. It will be good if there is music and air conditioning. The government cannot do this. There is no way you can do it. If you implement your proposals, yes, they will help. But in the long term, Secretary, do you think the FEHD would really like to take this up? Do you have too much time on your hands? You have to have people managing the markets. You have to deal with tenancy, etc., etc. I think you should hive it off to a statutory body. That would be the easiest way out, and they can try with different business models. What is the view of the consultant? Consultant first. Why don't we have a complete overhaul, Dr. Su, on this issue of statutory body? We, in fact, would highlight in our report that the administration should continue to look at other possibilities. Our understanding is that apart from raising that possibility, if we in fact discussed it, we proposed that the administration should look further into it. Would you agree that market operation should be hived off from the administration, just like the hospital authority? Secretary, do you think if you were managing hospitals directly, we would have the same present situation? We are talking about the same secretary. Sorry, Dr. Su, please continue. To a certain extent, we agree with Mr. Michael Teen. Public markets are public resources, and the government should make use of public resources effectively. We agree with that totally. As to how the reform should be done, we think the administration should really look at this possibility through a detailed study. Mr. Secretary, Michael Teen has taken words out of your mouth saying that you might not want the responsibility anyway. On the medical side, you have a hospital authority. Please be brief. Why don't you do that for markets? I have an open mind now. But at this time, I cannot arrive at the same viewpoint as Mr. Michael Teen. You should thank me for taking words out of your mouth and out of your heart indeed. Mr. Chen Han Pen, and then Alice Mack. Chairman, I have to declare interest. My family members, some of them work in markets. That's my declaration of interest. Just now, Mr. Michael Teen said that he has his own business, and then he also operates rented premises, and now he is a councillor. Well, I have been a grassroots, and now I am a legislator, so I have my background as a grassroots, and I like to speak on their behalf. From Mr. Michael Teen's angle, he might be right, but as someone from the grassroots level, I think his thoughts are dangerous because he is in fact inventing another link REIT. We agree that the government should improve our markets vis-a-vis the management mode, but we are of the view that the government should take up the responsibility to provide operating space for grassroots, including in the form of markets. You should charge low rental if people do clothes mending or sell vegetables. They should have some space to do so they can support their families and give education to their children, so grassroots have this upward mobility possibility. I therefore object to looking at this issue purely from a commercial angle. You should look at it from a macro angle. There are different strata in society, and if we only operate with a calculator, I don't think it's meaningful. We don't need a government if that's the case, because only the fittest will survive. If you can't survive in the ocean, just get swallowed up. I think that is dangerous. I can't agree with one point in the report. It says public markets should not be required to help to stabilize prices. I can't support that because let us look at Yonge Road Market. It has a complete supply of goods and prices are inexpensive. It is quite famous in the neighborhood. People go to that market for commodities. The main reason is that the rents are comparatively low, so they can sell food items that are inexpensive. This goes to show that rentals and prices must be set in a proportionate way.
There are other stores near Yonge Road, but it can still survive because of this. And we therefore should not make this conclusion that public markets are being phased out. I don't agree. They just need improvement. So I agree that according to this report that we need to improve public markets. Of course, there are also problems. For example, we need to relocate some stores, and there may be some difficulties, and yet we should embrace the difficulties. So I think the government should do it. As for air conditioning, the 85% threshold is a problem. The other problem, however, has much to do with AC fees. If I rent space in the public market, I'd be happy to pay for AC fees for the area occupied, but not the public corridor. The government, however, says that they should also pay for the AC fees in the common corridor, and that's really the bottleneck of the problem. I conducted some surveys in the past. Say if a stall is to be relocated, if AC system is to be installed, some stalls may have to be relocated. So some tenants just not happy with it, and they come out and object. And there are different types of air conditioning nowadays. So perhaps we can start afresh and consider whether it's possible to adjust the, say, electricity tariff. Because public markets help stabilize prices and help people's livelihood. Well, many members, such as Mr. Michael Tian, may be speaking of good intention, but what he said just now is really disappointing. I hope Secretary will not just hear what he likes to hear. So there are 2 points I've made. Low rental serves the function of stabilizing prices, and also the proportion of AC fees to be paid by tenants. 2 questions. Who would like to take the question, Secretary? This gives me an opportunity to say what I had in mind just now. 85% threshold. Well, from the time I assumed office, the government has been insisting on this percentage. If you ask me personally, I don't think it is really fixed. However, we must understand that if we are to install air conditioning apart from electricity charges, we have to consider the fact that some tenants are reluctant to pay any power bill at all. Some suggest that the charges should be paid according to the rent, and there are other problems such as technical difficulties. As I inquired with different public markets, I understand there are difficulties technically, and we need tenants in the public market to stay united to resolve problems together. Finally, for the whole process and how long it would take, if you lower the threshold, then of course it may be easier to install air conditioning. But what about those in dissent? Are they going to pay electricity charges in future? Are they going to cooperate with us? Are they going to agree to the technical proposals? That's why we opt for a higher threshold, so as to overcome or so that it will be more likely for us to overcome these challenges. Of course, if you set the threshold at 51%, it's easy to pass any proposal, but you need to address the 49% in dissent. They may choose to give up their stores or not to pay electricity charges. So allow me to add that if we are really lowering the threshold, we need a mechanism to put it more bluntly, mandate and compel those in dissent to accept the proposal. If we don't have this mechanism, we can foresee conflicts on a daily basis. This is what we need to consider. Well, Secretary, even for my own experience, I have seen this long-standing problem for 3 terms of LegCo already. About functions and positioning of public markets, can we ask the consultant to respond as well? I think it would be very disappointing if there is nothing in your report about air conditioning. You should be here not to raise questions, but to resolve questions. I've been a member for 3 terms already. I've seen a lot of problems. Of course, I understand Mr. Chen would like the consultant to answer the question. Mr. Chen just now raised a point about what Mr. Michael Tian said might not be to his liking. Mr. Tian just now, however, said that he was speaking when he was talking about what Secretary had in mind but dared not say. So I ask Secretary to respond to that. Are you asking my question or not? I didn't ask Secretary, I'm just making a comment. All right, then consultant. In short, rental and prices of goods may not be 100% directly linked. The problem is the government doesn't control prices. Prices of goods or food in public markets may not necessarily be lower than those outside. What is meant by 100%? Let me supplement 3 points. A reasonable transitional arrangement for public markets to align with the free market. I think we can do it step by step. But the more lenient and transitional arrangement is necessary. For the tenants that we came across, they reasonably told us that the increase in rental might be acceptable to them if they could really do some business. Otherwise, it's out of the question. So we should do it step by step and align public markets with the free market. Ms. Chang, please be brief because Mr. Chan's time is up. Well, Yangon Street public market, it has to do with the overall planning. I'm familiar with the public market as well, and with abundant supply, the prices are low, and I think this is the main reason. So it has a role to play. Ms. Alice Mack, I think my colleagues have spoken on the AC issue. I think about the consultancy study, the first issue is about functions and positioning. I don't know, perhaps because we only have the abstract of the report, I don't see much about functions and positioning. It says that public markets will continue to be one of the major sources of fresh food provisions for the general public. But apart from that, I don't see much. Ms. Chang just now stressed a number of times that public markets should be aligned with free market. But my question is whether it should really be aligned with the free market. We already have link REIT. I oppose this idea of aligning public markets with free market. Otherwise, we should perhaps just give up all our markets to link REIT and let it do the job. So for the positioning of public markets, it's not just about whether public markets are comparable to other markets, whether it should be financially independent. Well, if we want to cut loss simply because the audit criticizes public markets for their losses, I don't think it's right, because this will take away the choice of the general public and grassroots in buying cheaper goods or food. I don't think the audits is always 100% correct. Positioning is very important. Perhaps this is just the abstract. I hope in future in your report you can put in more details about that, because I think you should consider it. The other point is this. I share Mr. Ban Chan's view. I don't agree to Mr. Michael Tian's suggestion of setting up another committee or an organization. We already have too many. If the matter can be resolved by setting up a body or an organization, then why don't we save the effort and allow Link REIT to do its job? If it's all up to free market, then just sell all markets to the private sector. Well, in certain industries, they're losing their functions, and I want to emphasize that. And I want to ask about management models you mentioned. One of the options is whether to sublet to a single operator, and I strongly oppose it. Please don't even consider this option, because for the single operator, they'll take up all the stalls in the market and they'll dominate the market. You won't get anything good out of it. So if you only rely on a free market, yes, it's an easy way out, but we're talking about assistance given to the general public. And I want to comment on this report. Of the 6 markets, I agree strongly with the consultant's report that accessibility is very important. For Wing Fong Street, the market, the entrance should be relocated. Well, you see a row of stalls in front of the market, and the street is very crowded. There are always a lot of complaints. However, these patrons are unwilling to just turn the corner and go into the market. So it's hoped that by switching the entrance, we can attract more patrons. And I also agree that the layout should be improved, but when you improve the internal layout, the market may be affected. I hope we don't need temporary closure for these markets to be improved internally. Otherwise, during the temporary closure, the patrons would just choose other stalls, and the existing patrons would rather patronize the stalls in front of the market along the busy street instead of going back to the public market. So this is for the government to consider how you can work better with tenants in implementing any improvement plan. So to emphasize positioning is important. I think even if we incur losses, we still need to have public markets. It may not be necessary for public markets to be aligned with the free market. This is not our goal. And let me put this question to you, Secretary. Do you agree with Mr. Tian's remarks that he is saying what you daren't say? Secretary, you have your turn now. First of all, I keep an open mind to all options at this stage. However, I cannot make any conclusion at this stage on whether I agree with Mr. Tian's suggestion or not, because there are pros and cons to every option. At present, public markets are directly under the management of the government, and when some tenants do not follow the mainstream view and follow the requirements, it may be, well, it is more difficult. On the other hand, I also agree that the government has an important role to play. It must ensure that public markets should continue to serve the general public according to the functions and positioning mentioned. If we just take a business angle, we do not need to consider the tenants there. We just need to consider whether the future markets will be successful.
From the government's angle, the tenants who are operating in the market now are our responsibility. We have to face up to their aspirations. So what do you mean? I don't have any final decision now. Okay. That's it for the first round. I will now use my 7 minutes. Okay? Number 1. We have always thought that report would take a look at the background and history of public markets, and then it would try to position the future functions of public markets. But judging from what we have in front of us today, this summary of report and also the government's paper, the positioning is just in one line, that it is one of the major sources of fresh food provisions for the general public. If that is also the line to be contained in the final report, we are bound to be disappointed. As the Secretary knows, in our past discussion, we said that the administration should think about a monopoly of the market by supermarkets and the link rate. This is not the language that only I use. You know, Secretary, that this is the language used by the general public. Facing up to the monopoly by link rate and supermarkets, how then should our administration position public markets? I'd like to listen to the Secretary and the consultant in a moment. From the questions and answers between the Secretary and members just now, it seems the consultant does not operate within any limits. The Secretary said, for example, if the consultant should not mention air conditioning, then the administration cannot discuss it. But then we were hearing from Ms. Zhang and Dr. Su. They have their own views about air conditioning. So if that's the case, I think the Secretary should say this in the open meeting here, that in fact the consultant does not have to operate within any limits. So that is my first question, positioning and functions of public markets. Would you say more about that? Secondly, if I may refer to page 26 of the PowerPoint, you use 6 different very bright colors to denote the 6 markets. You call these the main points of the design concept. I'd like to know whether my understanding is correct. The consultancy report would provide a prototype. As Mr. Wong Kwok Heng was saying, that would be for the reference of all 70 markets. I'd like to know how these would be linked. Is it that these would be the 6 directions proposed by the consultant, and whichever market thinks they fit into a particular one, then they can just copy it? Since at this stage, you say we can still have an influence on the final report, I think we'd like to participate in this way, and that is by asking the second question of the consultant. Number 3, some Tin Shui Wai Kai Fongs know we have this meeting today, and they told me that I should ask whether this report would also say something about the setting up of new markets. This is also for the consultant. Will your report touch upon this? Last but not least, I have a few questions for the Secretary. Number 1, when do you think the report can be uploaded to the government website? Number 2, the rental adjustment mechanism. What is the roadmap and timetable for that to come to this subcommittee? Under item 2 of the agenda, we have to discuss how we can try to secure approval of the House Committee to extend our term. But the regulations are very strict. We can only extend up to the 24th of June, and that is for 3 months. I'd like to know whether it is possible for you to do this before the 24th of June, and that is whether you can come up with a proposal for rent adjustment based on the report to be released. Because basing on what you're going to tell me, I might have to do something with the House Committee. So, Secretary, can you take up those questions? Especially my first and last questions for you. Let me see if I have heard you correctly. The first question is about the report of the consultant and when it can be uploaded to the web. My understanding is that the report is now in the final touch-up stage, and the quickest is for it to be uploaded in a matter of weeks. But today, the chairman and members raised certain questions. For example, number 1, the functions and positioning of public markets. You say it is not detailed enough. If the consultant would take up that point, well, of course, I think it still should be possible, because the consultant does not have to do any more field study to take up this point. Basically, the information is already there. It's just how you put it in the report. If the consultant has to use more time to meet the demand of this subcommittee, I think the consultant should do it. Number 2, air conditioning. If the subcommittee is of the view that at least the consultant has to come to a view on air conditioning, I think they should. But by the same token, I don't think this requires more time. I think it should have been included in the original study. But as to timing, whether we should give more time to the consultant, then yes, perhaps we should. And if that's the case, that may take 2 or 3 months. Your second question has to do with the deadline of 24th of June. That is, whether we can have the report before that. Let me state again my understanding. The report has to come from the consultant. And of course, we have already read a big part of it. We are already thinking about it, and we have already told you our initial thoughts. Now, what kind of options are we going to put forward on the basis of the consultant report? I'm sure I can do it in June, but it may not be a very detailed proposal. In other words, if I will just indicate the direction of development, I think I can do it in June. The subcommittee, of course, has its own timetable, but the government also shares that concern. We have to also make proposals for the rent adjustment mechanism within a certain timetable. So I hope when I make proposals in June, I would attend to both issues. Okay, very good. The Secretary has already stated his position. Some members would like the report to include a few points. Can now the consultant comment, and especially with regard to page 26 of the PowerPoint and how that may relate to the 70-odd markets, whether you would mention new markets, etc. Regarding members' concerns, we can certainly beef up those points in the report. As for the 6 markets here and how that can relate to the other 70 markets, I would not say things in too certain a manner. Well, there may be generic problems that attend the 70 markets, and in fact, these 6 markets also have common problems among them. When we improve these markets, we'll also improve upon the common problems. But each market has a particularly evident problem. This is just to indicate a direction. As for the 70 markets, we would propose that we can somehow categorize them according to the biggest problems they have. Ms. Zhang, and then I'll go to the Secretary. I'd like to answer those 3 questions. Number 1, the functions and positioning. The statement here is a very broad one. We say it is one of the major sources of fresh food provisions for the general public. It is quite a broadly cast statement. I think there's an advantage in writing a statement like that. Number 2, we mentioned the 6 markets, but if you look at the stall signs, directional signs, toilets, storage rooms, etc., and also drainage, many of these can be applied to different markets. The applicability of such design concepts is high. As for new markets, it might not be within our terms of reference, but if you go back to functions and positioning, we say public markets are one of the major sources of fresh food provisions. That's it. We, of course, respect the professionalism, observations, and analysis of the consultant. Ms. Zhang says a broad statement is good, but we might not identify with it totally. I understand the Secretary has raised his hand. I'm sure I will give you the time to speak, but before that, I'd like to ask members. I'm going to exercise my authority to extend the meeting to 12:45. No objection. I support. I'm the only one supporting. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to functions and positioning, whether we should only have this statement saying that it is one of the major sources of fresh food provisions for the general public. Well, to be fair to the consultant, that is not the only statement. But in the report and also in my response, I have said that we wouldn't like the public markets to be too upmarket. We have pointed out that most importantly, it should be decent and clean and tidy. But having said that, I would agree with the chairman that as the consultant, I would expect that they can beef up the statement. Secondly, the 6 design concepts. I'd like to add something because I have been liaising with the consultant throughout the process. As they said, this is going to be a prototype. In other words, it is not that by putting the market against a particular word that represents the only problem of that market, but that would represent the main area for attention. And as the consultant said, we are not assigning one design concept to each of the remaining markets. That's not the case. When we look at other markets, we can see whether they fit in with any of these prototype design concepts. But of course, there are other attending problems that should be improved upon as well.
Well, I also subscribe to your views, but I hope that in the final draft of the consultant's report, you could make it clear, the positioning, because we're not the expert, so please put your statement more clearly so that both members and the general public can be given a better idea. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, second round, 2 minutes or 3 minutes perhaps. Thank you, Chairman. I have a suggestion for the government. Well, they can decide whether to answer my question or not, but please do incorporate my suggestion in your future documents. In the conclusion part of the paper, of course this is just preliminary. I think this is too succinct, and I think in fact it is quite negative. For example, in the first paragraph, having listened to the views of the recommendations, we should step up enforcement, so on and so forth. And then in the second paragraph, the goal is to increase rent. So the public has this impression that this is quite negative. Whatever you do, you just aim at increasing rent. So I hope the government would consider my suggestions. Firstly, the government and small operators should forge partnerships. It's not the relationship of a cat and a mouse. Well, if you want to step up enforcement stringently, it's just a relationship of cats and mice. And you also talked about enhancing the sense of ownership and a sense of participation among tenants. If you don't strive to forge partnership with them, you can't achieve any of this. Secondly, in the government's conclusion, the government should promote public markets, and that there should be duties and responsibilities acknowledged by tenants. There should be duties and responsibilities in order to achieve success, so that they are given duties and responsibilities, and they can make profits from their business. Thirdly, we should revitalize and reform public markets. This should be our objective or our line of thinking. Public market is not our negative asset. It can be positive. this is positive asset, not negative asset. There is a history behind public markets, and in order to reform and revitalize them, you must invest. You must be willing to invest. Otherwise, it's impossible to implement any of the consultants' recommendations. Without the mindset for reform and revitalization, you won't go anywhere. So these are my 3 points of suggestion. Having heard the consultants' presentation and having read their report, I think we need these 3 points. I hope the Secretary would consider them. My judgment is that the 3 points made by Mr. Wong do not conflict with the consultant's report or what Secretary said. Secretary, what your response? Well, I also agree, as Chairman puts it, as for the 3 points you raised, there is no contradiction with our view, and conceptually, they're in fact in agreement with the government's position. Now, on your first point, should we place too much emphasis on enforcement? And you, on the contrary, suggest that partnerships be formed. I think that these two can go in parallel. Yes, we can forge partnership, but for non-compliant tenants, we must be more active in following up on these cases. On powers, responsibilities, I agree. I also agree with revitalization, so I'll fully take members' views on board today. Consultant? Yes, we also agree. Partnership is an ideal. I think this is what we should be heading. And it will be a challenge to mend the relationship. And enforcement and partnership, if these two can go parallel, this will be a good cycle as far as business is concerned, and I fully agree with revitalization. I want to emphasize that public market is a positive asset, not negative asset. If we have the mindset to revitalize markets, if we have good partnership with tenants, we should mobilize tenants in taking part in the reform, and the general public as well. They should be invited to join the reform so that we have a fair, just and transparent system, and that everyone should comply with the law so that everyone does their business on the same starting point. And the public can also monitor the operation of public markets. I hope that the administration can respond positively to these suggestions so as to win public's trust. We must have empathy in order to mobilize tenants in revitalizing public markets. Otherwise, if they are treated as mice and that they should be penalized, they would not be willing to take part in any improvement plan. Yes, we agree that all along it is the subcommittee's view that public markets are a positive asset, not negative asset. We have had a fruitful discussion today. I hope, Secretary, you would also understand that this discussion has been fruitful before you prepare the final report. So, as we await the final report, as Mr. Wong Kwok Heng said just now, we're going to hold a public hearing to collect views from the public. Finally, housekeeping matters. As I said in the beginning, if there is no objection from members, the subcommittee will seek support of the FSCH panel for application with the House Committee for extending the period of this subcommittee until the 24th of June. You support it, right? All right, would the Secretariat please help us with the administrative work? We hope that we could extend it to the 24th of June, but according to the Secretary's remarks just now, we might not be able to finish our work before that, so we may have to queue up again next year. The Secretariat said that after the 24th of June, our work can be passed back to the panel for follow-up. So let's see what will happen. We at least have to conduct a public hearing. And the Secretariat will closely liaise with the government and see when the final report will be ready. So we're going to hold a meeting as soon as it's ready. Nothing on the AOB? All right, meeting's adjourned.